Hello everybody. So today I'm going to talk about airfield patterns. So the two easiest things to remember about airfield patterns. Because the active runway is always facing into the wind as much as possible, upwind is always facing the same direction as the active runway. This is done to reduce the airspeed on the aircraft and the landing distance on the runway, so the active runway is always facing into the wind as much as possible. You may still have a crosswind, but it'll they typically will not land you with a tailwind, but with the nose of the aircraft pointed into the wind. Number two, finals should always end at the beginning of the active runway, unless you declare a go-around. If you declare a go-around, fly the length of the runway and then make a turn to rejoin the downwind leg. So, the best way to describe an airfield pattern is a circuit or an oval around the active runway, and typically done within 3 miles of the active runway. There are 4 sides to the pattern. Each one has an expected altitude for you to be at for its part. In a left-hand traffic pattern, which has all left-hand turns, upwind will be flown on the right side of the active runway at about 1,000 feet AGL, and in most fighters this is done at 350 knots. Crosswind is the leg which follows the first left-hand turn and will take you perpendicular to the airport to gain some separation for the approach to the runway. Downwind is the leg which is going in the opposite direction to the landing traffic, and you are expected to be at about 800 feet AGL for the leg of this pattern. So when you go from upwind to downwind, you will be descending about 200 feet, and you should be slowing the aircraft to about 30 to 40 knots above the landing speed for most aircraft. And you should be beginning your landing configuration on this leg. That means deploying your flaps and your gear and getting the aircraft ready for landing, whatever other preparations you need, say your trim, anything else. Base is the last leg of the circuit, and in this leg, this will take you back towards the runway. From this leg, you can enter final and begin your landing, or you can decide to abort the circuit, and you can re-enter the upwind and circle the airport and do the pattern again. On this leg, you should have everything configured for landing, and by the time you're on final, your main focus should be on landing the aircraft. Now, pattern entry. The airfield pattern I just described has 2 main entry points, upwind and downwind. Both of these are considered the entry points into the airfield circuit. Now, while you can enter the pattern on the crosswind or base leg, it is not considered the best way to enter the pattern. This is mostly due to traffic coming at a 90-degree angle to you that you may not see if you're still descending, or any unexpected traffic that hasn't called in, or in a place that you are not expecting it. You possibly cannot see it until it's too late. Now, each of these entry points has 2 entry methods. The straight in, which you are flying the same heading as that leg requires, which both of these are parallel to the runway, just heading in opposite directions. Or you can enter the leg on a 45-degree angle to the leg. At no time should that 45-degree angle ever cross the active runway. Having the 45-degree leg cross the runway is not safe due to any landing or taking off traffic that can suddenly appear or that you did not see or take into account when you were executing the entry into the pattern. Remember, everything in this airfield pattern operates on see and avoid, which means you have to see the aircraft to avoid it and to avoid a collision. Both pilots in both aircraft are responsible for this. So if you see an aircraft, you're to maintain separation and avoid a collision with the aircraft as much as possible. One additional piece of information. When we refer to a break is a 180-degree turn from the upwind to the downwind leg, briefly passing through the crosswind leg. This is usually done with some G's loaded on the aircraft, usually about 1 G for every 100 knots. So at about 350 knots, the G load on an aircraft should typically be at about 3.5 Gs if you're going to be executing a break in a fighter aircraft. Okay, so now we're going to demonstrate everything that we just learned about the airfield pattern. So we're going to set ourselves up here on downwind, and we're going to enter the downwind at 1,000 feet above ground level. So currently we're at 1,700, so we're going to descend. And we're going to be starting upwind just to the right of the runway, so we're going to align ourselves just over the airfield structures here. Pick up just a bit of speed. Alright, so now we've entered upwind runway 31 at Vaziani. And we're going to then do a break into downwind. So we're going to hold our altitude, we're going to wait until the end of the runway, and then we're going to execute a break. So we're going to then do a 180-degree turn direct onto downwind. So here we go, we're going to execute the break. We're going to pull about 2.8 Gs because that's approximately what we have on board the aircraft. So we're pulling 2. Going to reduce power in the turn. Power's now at idle. Gonna hold those G's. Gonna allow the aircraft to reduce in altitude and reduce in airspeed. So we've managed to pick up just a little bit of altitude, so we're gonna descend. And I'm looking to see the runway at wing level. That is good. It means we're at a good distance. So we're going to slow down below flap setting, so half flaps, gear down. And now I'm just going to wait for the runway to come between the tail and the wing. And now is a good time to start our base turn. Going to add some power to compensate for the drag from the flaps and the gear. Now my attention is going to be focused on aligning the aircraft to the runway. Last thing I do, flaps to full. Increase a little power here. Now we've gone from base to final. Lined up the runway. Just gonna get the flight path director onto the runway. Now I'm just gonna control the descent. Pop a little speed brake. Confirm gears down and locked. Good to land. Now we're just gonna adjust pitch and throttle to maintain our descent. A flare. Little bounce. Now hold the aircraft nose up. Speed brakes deployed. Now flight brakes. Alrighty guys, that was a demonstration of the airfield patterns. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next video.